Hi, this is Becky Schultz, editor of Equipment Today and for Construction Pros with forconstructionpros.com. And I am here with John Meola, safety manager of the Timmons Group, and we are going to be talking about heat safety. John, just based on what we've seen in terms of temperatures here in Wisconsin over the past couple of weeks, clearly we are in for kind of a brutal summer, and I'm sure that we're not alone. Can we talk a little bit about what some of the risks are for construction workers and anyone actually who's working outside and in hot environments during the summer timeframe?
The hot season, it's starting earlier and lasting longer with peaks of more severity in between. And that's the new normal. That's just going to be the climatology and how the weather changes. Anyway, we're not going to talk about the big picture on that side. We'll try to focus on what can I do. Hey, I'm the supervisor. I got a road crew. We're going out there. I got 3 trucks lined up with, asphalt that's at 140 degrees, and it's a big mass of heat. And by the way, what are all those waves coming off in the air? Those are the volatile organic solvents vaporizing out of that asphalt, and you're breathing that. So now you've got a really a little complex industrial hygiene, because my guys are going to breathe this stuff all day. And mercifully, they're outdoors, so there may be some air movement, but that's an occupational exposure that's layered on to the larger picture. So what do I do as a company? Well, I can tell you the industry has really taken this point blank on the nose. Number one, we've got to go out and do the job. So we're going to be out there in the heat. Well, in the meantime, the safety people have recognized that OSHA, the farm workers, the agricultural people, most of the community that works outdoors, they're making a lot of noise on it. If you go to the OSHA webpage, at least up until I think it was probably middle of February, the advisories were emblazoned across, heat awareness, heat stress, have a plan, hydration, all of which, yes, good. Now that's been replaced by COVID.
Sure.
Because they're focused, obviously, and rightfully so, because, one illness will offset the other. But the fact is the risk remains. We have to accept it and deal with it. The protocol for dealing with this, and this is not just OSHA. Center for Disease Control, NIOSH, they have their advisories, their bulletins. Most of the big industrial folks, the guys in the foundries and steel mills, they've been dealing with this for years, the paper mills, hot environments. But the outdoor workers, they're getting crushed. They're getting crushed because the heat is coming on sooner, lasting longer. You don't have as much heat cooling overnight. When the temperature stays above 75, it goes to 106 during the day. It doesn't go below 75. That's a heat emergency in the eyes of the science guys. And there is a website listed on my notes here. I think it's weather.gov/safety/heat. And that opens up a couple of pages that are highly informative. And it's kind of like, you want to be in the position, it's like, I never knew that. I better, accommodate this in my mantra going forward. So the resources are out there. They're becoming more known. But the one that we had to deal with early on was from the big vetting agencies, of which anybody who's been, rubbing elbows with, it's becoming more common in the industry. IS Networld, Avetta, Browse. There's 4 or 5 others out there that they are all, these guys are on the cutting edge. They're looking over the horizon because they're not dependent on OSHA regulatory so much as they are is, well, what does my client want to see? And the big international guys, they are all over this. The fact is that, the at-risk populations are pretty well defined. Take, for example, remember the silica rule when that came out? It was like probably 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago now. Well, the silica rule, that kind of replicated some of the provisions. Number one, respiratory protection, staying upwind, kind of dovetails going back to our COVID thing. But extrapolate that for the heat factor. Well, those guys, the silica dust, if you're on the ground with a saw, you've got to use water, you've got to have a respirator, you can have a dust mask, you can, do certain housekeeping chores, maintenance of the equipment. Well, if you extrapolate some of those things, number one, the equipment operators, they're sitting in air-conditioned cabs, so they're automatically protected. Well, these guys kind of get an exemption on the heat stress thing to say, well, wait a minute, those cabs are so heavily air-conditioned, they got to put a little heat into it to avoid, building up condensation, to say, well, it's too cold. Well, that's a very small part of the population. For most of the folks, and I'm just going to run through my mantra, and some of this, I was actually, pleased to see that when I looked at the OSHA website, they named the same people: framing crews, paving crews, pipe laying, masonry trades, boots on the ground, surveyors, inspectors, telecom, cable people, steel erection. But in the meantime, remember we said OSHA does not have a discrete rule. It's defined, not directly accountable on this. It's not like there's a compliance regulation. They would probably cite a egregious example. You had 3 people admitted to the hospital with heat exhaustion. You'd get cited. The fact is, they would come back. They'd probably cite it under the general duty clause, failure to maintain a workplace free from recognized hazards. Well, I'm sorry. 103 degrees, you got these guys working on a paving site. That's a recognized hazard for heat. The first question they're going to ask is, and I'm going to get demonstrative here. I have my very expensive whiteboard. I don't know if you can see it in the background. They're going to want to see the W word, the written plan. The written plan or program. Do you have anything in writing that says? Now, OSHA is going to ask that question, but the other guys, the Avetta and the ISNet world, they're going to ask the question, and they want the plan uploaded to their library so the client can look at it and say, does it meet our criteria? And how I know this is we just had to do it 4 times for 4 different agencies, and we had to deliver the plan, a written plan. So the written plan, basically, it's fairly straightforward. It doesn't have to be an encyclopedia. It's a few lines that starts with, what is our company policy? Do we recognize this as an issue we need to deal with? Well, obviously, yes. We have leadership. We have demonstrated, we've written it into our mantra. We recognize it. They want to see employee training on how hot it is. You got to explain the effects of the heat, what it's going to cause, hydration. The hydration section alone has been vastly oversimplified. It's like, well, make sure they got water out there. Okay, I get that part. It's a little more complex, and that's in the standard as well. That says, or that private party standard that says you must give water to the population, drinkable water from an endless source. They've got to have as much as they want. You've got employee training. Okay, we're going to, and it doesn't have to be a classroom thing. It can be done at a safety meeting, could be done at a toolbox meeting, get your signatures, but make sure this information gets out there. And the more you want to delve into it, there's a laundry list of elements that we'll probably touch on if you don't turn me off early. But the fact is, the training, it's in 2 levels. Average employee, obviously, you want this person to know certain elements of information. Hey, at least I told you. Are you taking personal medication that could be exacerbated by the effects of being dehydrated or high heat? Well, if you got some borderline cases, that's got to be out there. The other element is employee training. There is supervisory training, and that's a little different mantra. Did you teach your supervisors how to recognize the effects of heat illness? Did you teach your supervisors, and this is right out of the mantra, how to select an employee based on their ability to withstand high heat exposures. Morbid obesity, smoking history, hypertension, he's got diabetes. Did you pick that guy to go unload that truck out in the parking lot or to work for extended out in the direction? In other words, they're shifting the burden back to the employer through the supervisory training to say, hey, you better make an intelligent selection. Because if this guy keels over and we have to take him to, the local clinic or emergency room, we're coming back to you under the occupational. But so they actually put it in their mantra, the selection criteria, and they're very specific about this. Supervisors will be trained on managing the effects of heat stress before they are before they're out supervising employees. In other words, you can't say, well, yeah, we'll get to it eventually. No, they want to see it in advance of, so that the selection criteria takes place before these guys are going out. Now, the reality of it is, most crews, it's like, hey, how many people showed up for work today? It's 100 degrees. Well, Sammy, he don't like the heat. He didn't show up. Well, now we got to deal with the crew we've got. Well, that narrows the selection process. But for example, in an ideal world, right here's you can't see it on your screen, but I'm reading through it. Obesity, morbid obesity, smoking habits, hypertension, general physical condition. Those are among the top. People with known medical disabilities, people taking medications, people who come to work obviously in no shape to deal with extreme heat. You're going to be out there sweating bullets for long intervals. Here's another one that's part of the training. Employees must have the opportunity to take what they call restorative breaks to cool off. They must have the opportunity to take that break in a shaded, protected area. Not air-conditioned, although it could be preferable if it's available. A shaded, protected area. This is right out of the mantra. And this is going to become more, and most people by now are pulling their hair out saying, wait a minute, I'm not here to hold hands. This is not a daycare center. This is a paving crew, or I'm working on a roof. I got roofers I got to do. Get used to it. This is going to be the new normal going forward. So we're going to move into the next section. Okay, so we got 2 levels of training. Now we move into the hardware section. And you've got this thing called the OSHA hierarchy of controls. And if anybody's listening to this sermon and you haven't heard that word, you got to do a little research. The OSHA hierarchy of controls. It's really simple. Number 1 is engineering controls. Number 2 is administrative. And number 3 is PPE, personal protective equipment. In the construction business, regrettably, most people reach for the PPE without even looking at the top 2. Well, I'm sorry. In this case, we've got to do a little more geometry. The same controls apply, by the way. The hierarchy of controls, it applies to any of the OSHA regulatory. Silica, power tools, lockout, tagout, fall protection. Can we engineer a better way to eliminate the hazard? In this case, it's the heat. You say, well, what do you mean? I'm not the Lord Almighty. I can't define a change in temperature. Yeah, but you can think a little harder and come up with, if your guys are going to be on that roof all day in the blazing hot sun, you can buy industrial umbrellas that are made for, just general application. In other words, you've got to give now the other option is the guy can get down off the roof and go to a shaded area, which is usually just the side of the building. That implies up and down, climbing a ladder. Suppose you're 4 stories up, you're doing whatever. So try to minimize, at least use some technology. So we've got the portable shade. Obviously, if there are structures on the roof or structures in your area where you're working that give some shade, well, that's kind of a self-defining. Okay, next section we've got is fans. Any kind of fan or air movement. And this is starting to become more recommended. And also with the word fan is becoming the word misting fans. Been to the large theme parks, there's a misting station. that effect, that's not just for the entertainment crowd. That's becoming like an occupational element. If you rig this thing up, and they are expensive, the better ones are, industrial models. A misting fan actually has a highly restorative effect for heat transfer, evaporative heat transfer from the body. It actually sucks the heat out of your skin, and that droplets of moisture aid in the transpiration effect. Evaporation is the cooling. So that's another option that's becoming. But any fan in any configuration will at least move the air. And unless you've got some kind of a breeze, still air is the worst possible, because now you're just relying on the individual's perspiration and heat transpiration and evaporation rate, some more than others. Well, that can be a risk factor, especially when you layer on, the personality. The other elements that are becoming, we'll switch a little bit. So we've got engineering, which would be the shelters, the fans. Then we've got some interim. The interim actions are being able to take a break periodically. These are at the administrative control level. We've got engineering controls, administrative controls, allowed to take a break, provision of water. Employee selection is actually an administrative control. If you've got somebody on your crew that's, massively overweight, or they've, chain smoking, or they're already respiratory impaired, by the way, layer this on with COVID, and now you've got social distancing, you got these things, if there's face cloths, face coverings, multi-purpose cooling band. It's like everybody's getting in the act, which you're going to see increasingly the tool vendors and the equipment suppliers taking note and providing. The same thing they did with, for example, the silica standard. Overnight, the tool industry retooled and reconfigured and started offering, vacuum hoses and shrouds and water canisters and piping and all this stuff. Well, the industry, and then this should be an easy stretch for them. They can come up with some highly innovative ways, which I hope they will do. Here's one for you under the administrative section. Think about this. Can we do this job at night? Is there any possibility of getting out from the sun? Well, we really can't do it at night. However, we can start an hour earlier and knock off an hour earlier to avoid the hottest time. So that's an administrative section, by the way. Write all this stuff down in your written plan to show that you're on board with it. Here's a safety tip. I tell people this routinely. The penalty for not having anything, whether it's a plan or a fire extinguisher or whatever, that penalty is a lot. It's more, because you got nothing. You can't just stand there and say, no, I got a written plan. I told them. It's not it. The penalty for having an inadequate plan, insufficient plan, improperly detailed, blah, 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 is a lot less than not having anything. So go out there and write on the wall, written plan, do something, at least have something that if an inspector shows up, or God forbid, some guy keels over, and now you've got the rescue squad, or you've got some health inspector or the client, they're asking the question. You say, well, look, at least we tried. We did the training, we did the renewal, we did the refresher. So we've got all those elements. Okay, let's talk for a minute. This is a big item. I like this category because it offers a lot of ground for improvement. Clothing, dress, and most companies, in the construction trades, they don't really offer uniforms. They'll give you a vest. They'll give you maybe a high visibility shirt. They may give you a hard hat. They'll give you the PPE. Well, that dress code is going to come under a little bit of metamorphosis. It's already started because of this heat thing. How the person dress, how they show up for work, what they're wearing can make a big difference over the course of the day. The heat load created by a closed front garment is enormously more than open front, even if it's just a button, loosely buttoned or whatever. Most of the body heat most of the core body heat in the human body, 60-70% is right here in the torso. We reverse this equation in cold weather when we tell people to protect your core body heat, which is right here. Internal organs, the heart, the liver, the stomach, all of this protected to conserve heat. Well, now we're in the opposite mode. We want to get that heat out. Well, open front garments. By the way, have you ever read the label on the fabric that they make this stuff with? It's pure polyester. It's horrible. It's like wearing a blanket. Well, most people don't understand. You're wrapping that heat in, so it's got nowhere to go. You want heat coming out of the core of the body. It's not going to radiate from your head. It's not going to radiate from your feet. It's not going to radiate from your legs. It's the arms, the armpit, the shoulders, all up in here, but the central chest. So evaporative cooling, some air exchange. You need to be dressed light colors, lightweight, open front if possible. Regrettably, nobody allows shorts. I think the Australians allow it. In some cases where you can rule out hazards to the lower leg, you can safely engineer if the client allows it. And I think we're going to start seeing that. You get a little bit of extra cooling from the legs, but that's more, again, that's under the administrative portion of your controls. Hydration. Well, that's part of our employee education. That's part of our supervisory education, providing water. Anything I touch is going to have a degree of science behind it. Hydration, yes, good, I get it. Really important. I understand that. Hydration means liquid ingested into the body with some form of water content. The fact of the matter is, drinking a couple of bottles of water is not hydration. You're just passing that through your system. That's going to eliminate some salts, but it's not going to rehydrate. Hydration, here, I'll give you another example. Dietary. It begins with dietary. The hotter it is, the less you want to eat at midday. You can't have a big meal, put all that, and especially what you're eating, if it's grease or junk food or fast food, you do not want to load all that crap into your body. You've just put a high metabolic load on your stomach and esophagus and digestive tract. You really don't want all that crap in there. You don't need all that junk at noontime. You want to eat light salads, just a sandwich, minimal bread. Toasted bread is better than, just regular bread. You want to try to minimize, because that food load is going to translate into what the circadian rhythm. You ever heard the word ergonomics? That was I teach a semester class on ergonomics. There's one element under what's called the circadian rhythms, which should be part of our supervisory education. There's something called the post-lunch dip. Let's talk just for a quick second on hydration, which we talked about as say, well, okay, so we got to have a water supply, whether you like the taste of the water or not. By the way, Dasani and Aquafina, they're kind of at the head of the food chain on bottled waters because they're buffered, isotonic, they're filtered. It's a very pleasing, balanced taste. That stuff is the gold standard for drinking water, for bottled water. Anything down from that, do your research. At the end of the day, just throw them cases of water in the back of the truck, put a top over them, keep them out of the sun. That's it. You want ice? Okay, you get extra. Ice cold is a negative. Ice cold beverage, not recommended. It takes the body more energy. We're talking ergonomic energy. Takes the body more energy to assimilate ice cold. Jethro, I know it tastes good going down your throat. When you feel that knot in your throat, it means that the cold has actually constricted your thorax and drinking, system. And it's the cold. It takes the body more energy because it's got to take that cold water and warm it up to ambient temperature in order for the cell transfer to occur, for the H2O to actually be metabolized into your cells. This is part of the science. So ice cold is not recommended, and chugging any volume of liquid is not recommended. Sipping gradually throughout the day, long period. The fact of the matter is, Red Bull, boutique stuff, Monster, all of those boutique beverages, don't even let them on the job site. Don't even take them out of your vending machines. I've got projects working here, big projects, a couple of thousand guys every day going to work, high dollar trades, electricians and big stuff, systems, all hardware and high tech. They took the junk food right out of the vending machines. They didn't even want it on the site. No Coca-Cola. You can get Squincher, Gatorade, hydrating beverages. And those beverages by themselves, they're good. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, you really don't want these guys chugging any of that stuff right out of the bottle. Typically, what we recommend is to mix that stuff, cut it with a lot of water, because basically it's sugar and salt with a little bit of buffering agents and flavoring, et cetera. So you want to cut it with a lot of water. 50% is a good ratio to start with. Cut it with water, soften it up, because otherwise it's really sweet. I mean, if I chug Gatorade, even zero sugar, it's just, and anyway, that's just a preference. But the fact of the matter, so we got the post-lunch dip, we got the dietary, the hydration element alone. Couple that up with your dress code, with your PPE, with your nape protectors, which is this thing, cooling bandanas, artificial cooling garments. I know in the winter they make a vest that's heated. It's got its own little battery pack. Well, it's not going to be long. Maybe they're out there already. This vest is keeping me cool. It's just removing heat from the body. That can't be too far off. Even a rag, just a regular bandana, dunked in water, wrapped around the neck, a large amount of blood flow, carotid arteries going up from the heart, pumping straight up to the brain. The brain is the largest consumer of red blood cells. It wants that blood constantly flowing. So when we pump all that blood at even room temperature going up, well, the brain gets an infusion of heated blood. Well, I'm sorry, can we do any better? Yeah, you can cool it off a little bit, even a fraction of a degree of temperature. If we can do something to cool it, very refreshing, very cooling. At least it lessens that heat load going up into the cranial region. Awareness for masonry trade, steel erection. Think about it. This stuff sits there out there in the sun all day long. It absorbs, acts like a heat sink. Well, that's got to be part of our equation. By the way, if your job is to go out there, hot asphalt, hot stone, or hot whatever steel, I want something interface. I want a piece of cardboard, carpeting, plywood, something. So I'm not standing because I'm absorbing that into my feet. I don't want to add to the heat load. So again, insulation effects, which we are going to be seeing more. But these are all examples of, administrative controls. The PPE obviously is our dress. If we do distribute lightweight shirts or garments or, loose pants, baggy are preferred as to tight fitting garments. And that's kind of a rule that we see throughout all types of umbrellas, tilting umbrellas, multi-purpose mount, freestanding. I'll read you one line from their mantra just to show you the stringency that they adopt. Access to a shaded area will be permitted at all times throughout the course of the day in advance of the employee feeling the effects of heat-related illness. So access to a shaded area. If it's air-conditioned, you get extra bonus points. But here's another tip. Going in and out of air-conditioned environments when it's really hot, not particularly good practice. The body gets the basic equivalent of whiplash. On one hand, it's pumping out sweat, your garments are drenched, and now what? Well, now I'm going into the trailer, put my feet up. Well, in 3 minutes, you're going to be freezing because all that transport, all that evaporation rate. Now, most people would say, oh, yeah, but it feels so good. Okay, I get it. Well, now you're going to go back out into the heat and reverse the process. We got to make some decisions. In any event, another awareness items, supervisor and lead persons will be trained in our company heat policy as described in this section. Procedures will be in place to control the effects of environmental factors that can contribute. The most common are air temperature, humidity, radiant heat sources, air circulation or lack thereof, which is a long way of saying 5 words, the word fan, Physical factors we mentioned earlier: level of activity, duration, clothing. Supervisors, this is right out of their mantra. I had to go in front of my guys and say, supervisors must consider, right out of the rule book, employee personal factors that may contribute to heat-related illness before assigning a task where there's a possibility of illness. Person's general age. Well, I'm sorry, I fit into that category. Person's general age. Okay, well, that lets me out of the, okay. And it says, for instance, if they're over 60 years old, of which, I meet the criteria, may be more susceptible, relative weight and fitness, smoking history, obesity, medical impairments, infirmities, drug and alcohol use, history of prior medical, hydration levels. And it's like I can hear the supervisors, wailing now, saying, how do I know what his hydration level is? Well, we're going to make some reasoned. What we don't want is the guy out there getting a headache, vomiting, feeling, hey, I'm not sweating anymore. And at the end of the day, and this is another part of your mantra for the training, you must teach the employees and the supervisors how to recognize heat progression, heat illness progression. Real simple. You should never get thirsty. If you've reached the level where you're thirsty, you've already passed the onset of dehydration. That's number one. Number two, cramps, muscle cramps, especially in the legs or the buttocks. Gluteus maximus, those are the large muscles of the body. They use a lot of moisture. So you don't want them getting creaky for lack of hydration. That's a warning sign. Dehydration starting to creep in. Headaches, blurry vision, loss of concentration. You're in the mid-zone, you're in the warning. These are the warning signs. You got to be taking action now. This person needs to get out of the sun, get to a cool area, lay down, put their feet up. Purely therapeutic, put the feet up, rest a little bit, rehydrate, feel okay, get rebalanced. All right, maybe now reduced activity, but supervisors got to be part of this. The next levels get a little more serious on the scale. Loss of consciousness, incontinence, slurred speech, loss of vision. You can, at that stage, that's heat stroke. We don't want to be in the same room with that, but the body will give enough early warning signs to kind of keep us out of that if we know what to look for, how to react, and get the person aside, cool them off, do whatever. So we have covered pretty much the Encyclopedia Britannica grade. If it goes any more, I'm going to have to start handing out college credits for these courses. But that's basically heat stress awareness, protection, prevention, avoidance in a nutshell.